Welcome back to the TrailBLAZER Pod. I'm your host, Faye, and each week I bring you stories of Jewish women who are trailblazers. This week's trailblazer is Yaffa Palti, a Torah educator, and perhaps even the first Torah educator on Instagram. But as you'll hear in this episode, Yafa is so much more than that. She opens up about her personal journey of breaking free from labels and expectations and finding a deeper sense of purpose, which empowers her to face challenges head on. Let's dive in. Welcome to the TrailBLAZER Pod. How are you?
Thank you. I am so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. This is truly, truly an honor.
Thank you so much. I want to start off by saying that when I hear your name or I look at your face, you bring such special memories to me because I'm just going to let everybody know we met a couple of days before my wedding. My mom found you on Instagram and she's like, I think you should talk to this woman. I was 27 when I got married. So unlike a lot of girls who get married right out of seminary or high school, I never had like a college teacher or anything. She's like, talk to Yafa. And I'm like, I don't know Yafa. I'm kind of nervous about all this stuff. I don't know if I want to do this. But we met. You were incredible. You answered all my questions. I had a lot of questions. And so when I think of you, I think of that time in my life. So thank you for being that person to me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome. I loved speaking to you. I loved meeting you. I loved connecting with you. We had such a great time together.
Yeah,
so
we really did.
I'm happy. Yeah, so I'm happy to continue that now.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to start off by asking you something a little bit different. Everyone gets put into like little boxes, unfortunately. And like when people think of you or when I think of you as a Torah teacher, an educator, like a mentor. I want to ask you, when you look in the mirror, who's Yafa?
Ooh, good question. Well, I mean, the older I get, the more I see my mother when I look in the mirror.
I'm sure she's happy to hear that.
But really, to answer your question seriously, you know, I look in the mirror, I see a woman who has experienced joy, loss, self-doubt, gratitude. I see a simple, humble servant of God who is trying to do her best every day and who's going to make mistakes and who's going to be imperfect and who has imperfections that I'm looking at in the mirror. But I live in a world, in a society, in a time that is so obsessed with perfection.
Yeah.
We live in a world that it's too perfect.
Yeah.
Right. And it's actually unoriginal and contrived. And I'm happy to see myself as an imperfect human who's just trying her best. You know, I try to see myself without these filters and masks of comparison to others, of inadequacy, jealousy, of insecurities. I try to see myself the way Hashem sees me.
Yeah. I love that answer.
And
I think like everything you just said encompasses what we're going to be talking about. And that's why I wanted to ask you, because I didn't want to introduce you as just like, Yafa is a Torah educator, because it's not enough.
I love that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a perfect way to start. I want to ask you if you can share about your childhood. I asked this of all my guests because I think our childhood lays a really solid foundation for who we are or who we are not, right? Because sometimes we learn things from our childhood where we're, and talking about parents, we're like, I'm never gonna do that, or that's exactly how I want to do things, right? So if you can share a little bit about that.
Sure. Okay, I don't even know where to begin, but I'll try. Just like the memories of myself, when I think of myself as a child, I was very creative. I loved to have fun. I just loved to have a good time. But because of my nature, I enjoyed everything I did. So by default, I was just always having fun. Like even if I wasn't going somewhere or doing something to have fun, I knew how to have fun in whatever it was that I was doing. Wow. I also loved performing and being on stage and just using my creativity. That's what stands out most when I think of myself as a child. Class projects, those were my favorite days of school. And I would come in dressed in costume, always, of like whatever it was I was doing. You know what I mean? Yeah. I would come in with my boombox on my shoulder and like
that's
just
amazing.
Dance and, you know. Yeah. So now I get to use that as an adult, but in a spiritually channeled way. Yeah. You know, so that's what I really enjoy. But as for my role at home, I am the oldest girl and the second to oldest child of a very large family. I'm one of 10 biological siblings, but we also fostered many, many, many children throughout the years. So, I mean, at any point in time, we had 18, 20 people easily living in my home.
Like a classroom.
Literally. Yeah. You know, like I learned how to dance waiting online for the bathroom. You know what I mean? Like it was just, but it was a part of my life. That's just the kind of home I grew up in, you know? So there was always a lot of people, a lot of siblings from abused homes who needed love and support and a place to be. So I was the oldest of all this.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. And on top of that, at a certain point, my father had fallen sick and my mother had to work full time to support us. So I had to step up to a greater role of responsibility, independence, and of problem solving.
Yeah.
You know, what's interesting is that sometimes our coping mechanisms as children actually save us when we're young, but they can destroy us and our relationships as we get older.
Oh, I can so
Does that make
relate
sense?
to that, Yafa. You have no idea. It's something I'm working through now personally in my life where I'm trying to understand the coping mechanisms, like you're saying, they're not working for me anymore because they're not, I don't need to use them anymore to survive, and they're actually very destructive.
Right. Yes. Like, for example, someone who had to protect themselves as a child, for whatever reason, they grew up with incredible skills in self-sufficiency and independence, right? Yep. Which is wonderful as a child. They needed that for their survival. But if they bring that into their adult relationships, that becomes distance and it becomes emotionally unattached. And they have very difficulty expressing their needs if they're in touch with their needs at all. So I feel very blessed that I was able to kind of channel my default energy from childhood into positive relationships, teaching me that just because we always lived a certain way doesn't mean that that's how we have to live forever. We can change that, we can break that, and we can learn new ways of living and relating to ourselves and to other people. Yeah. With ourselves.
It's called growth, right?
That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's called growth.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So coming from such a large family, how does that affect you? I'm wondering if you had a hard time figuring out, like, who's Yafa in all of this? Was your identity the older sibling, one of 10, 18, 20, or did you like always know who you were inside? Some people struggle with it. Some people don't, right? I'm personally someone who always has, but not everyone does.
Yeah. Not everyone does. I'm not going to say it was a major struggle, you know, who is Yafa, like on a regular basis. I never really dealt with it in a detrimental kind of way, but it was more covert, I would say. Like, for example, I didn't have any needs. I couldn't have any needs. There were so many other priorities, you know, and there were so many other people who needed things, both physically and emotionally. I just fell into the role of giving without needing anything from anyone. So that was really a big part of who I became. So it took me a while to figure out who I am without anyone else, right? Just as me. And even to learn what I actually needed from other people in order to build healthy, dynamic, interdependent relationships, which is what we're here to do. But also, I come from a super hyperfunctional home. You know, people talk about coming from a dysfunctional home and the challenges that come with that, and there are many. But I've never heard of challenges coming from a hyperfunctional home. Like, for example, my mother was so capable of everything, what she has been through and who she has become and the kind of home she ran, even going through all those things with a sick husband and having so many people at home and so many children. And she had to work full time to support all of us when my father couldn't work anymore because of his illness.
He had MS?
My father had MS. Yes. My mother was so hyper functional. So that left me comparing myself to her when I became an adult. So I get married and I'm wondering, I didn't have half the things my mother had going on. Why was I not as organized as she was? Why was I not as efficient as she was?
So she set the bar
she set the bar so high for me, which wasn't a problem, but it was my own perspective that needed to be adjusted. I finally had to realize, well, my mother is her and I'm me. And I have to separate myself from her. There are things that I can do that she can't do, right? And I needed to kind of grow into myself and learn my own limitations, learn my strengths, learn my weaknesses, and learn how to channel each of them in the right direction so that I could accept and fortify the person that I am.
Wow. I think that's such an important point, because you're right. We don't talk about that. We always talk about, like, we can't compare traumas and everyone handles pain differently. But on the other hand, we also feel when we see those incredible role models, we weigh ourselves against those as well. It's both sides. So, okay. You mentioned that you were kicked out of 3 schools.
Okay. So I was kicked out of middle school after 8th grade. I was asked not to come back for 9th grade.
Okay.
It was a school that continued from kindergarten through high school. And then I was kicked out of 2 more high schools, 9th grade and 10th grade.
Okay. So I want to ask you about that experience. I was not kicked out of school, but I did switch schools a lot. And so I switched for 8th grade. and then I
Okay.
switched for 11th grade. So I was in 3 different schools in like 4 different years, right? So,
Same as me. Okay, so
okay,
same experience,
yes,
but manifested differently.
exactly. So I want to
Yeah.
ask you if you can share like what was going on there. And I know that your last school was actually a really amazing place for you. So if you can share that experience a little bit.
I think that the people of authority in those schools, they really did the best that they can with the
Hmm.
tools that they had. I don't think anyone was malicious. I don't think anyone woke up in the morning and said, "How can we make Yafa's life miserable today?" I get asked frequently, people who hear this story, do I hold any resentment towards them? I don't. I
Wow.
100% forgive each one of them. I honestly think that they really did the best they can. They didn't know anything else. They
Yeah.
didn't know what to do with me, a student who was very, say this positively, adventurous and energetic. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was a leader
Yeah.
who wasn't in their academic box
Mm.
of leadership. I was a free spirited, happy, fun girl who was never chutzpahdik and never out of line, but I didn't study or do much schoolwork, and I was just there to have a good time.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't realize till much later that I also had ADHD and I couldn't really sit and
Right.
study the way many people did. And I was very good in the subjects that I was naturally good at because I didn't have to study for them, but I didn't even know how to study. My brain worked a little
Yeah.
differently and they just didn't know how to cater to people like that. So what happened was instead of seeing me for who I was and recognizing and appreciating my creativity, my talents, my strengths, my leadership abilities, my midos,
Yeah.
like instead of realizing all of that, I was cast aside and rejected and asked to leave the school because I just didn't fit in to their box.
Yeah.
Now, what happened was once I was kicked out, I was rendered a rebel,
Right.
which I hadn't been until that point.
They
I
just put a
wasn't.
title on you. Yeah.
But they put a title on me and they put a label on me, and slowly, that label influenced my
Yep.
behavior. And so I started to live up to it.
Yep. It's like
That's what
self-fulfilling
happened.
prophecy, right?
That's exactly it.
What did that do to your self-esteem? I remember being so down on myself, and I didn't get kicked out. I chose to leave certain schools because I'm like,
Yeah.
why do 99.99% of the people I know,
Yeah.
why are they able to stick it out and figure out where they belong? And I'm here trying to figure out like where am I supposed to be? Why does this keep happening to me, right?
It's interesting that you say that because I was very confused. I was like, what am I doing wrong? And there were so many girls who were, and I'm going to say this in quotes, worse
Yeah,
than
yeah,
I
yeah,
was.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they weren't bad. Everybody was good,
Yeah.
wonderful people, but they were behaving so much worse than I was. Why was I the one to be kicked out? And only later did I realize I was a leader. And even if it was subconsciously, the schools naturally expected me to fall into a leadership position where I would lead everyone in the most positive way and bring out the best in everyone.
Yeah.
But I was 14 and I
Yeah.
was 15 and I wasn't told what the expectations were.
Right.
You
Wow.
know, I don't know if I felt like a failure or I felt like I was the problem, but I felt very confused. And of course, I went through moments and seasons where I did feel like, is something wrong with me? I don't feel like something's wrong with me, but everyone else seems to feel like something's wrong with me. So it was constant work on reminding myself that I don't know what I did. I don't understand what's happening and why nobody wants me in their school, but I don't think I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
And I had to keep reminding myself that I'm worthy just inherently.
Yeah.
I don't have to prove myself to anyone. And I never was bitter towards God, towards Judaism, but I did stop keeping certain things that I did. And, because I was struggling in that area of confusion of, well, if this is what I'm doing and that's not good enough, then maybe I have to do something else. And if nobody likes me and nobody respects me and nobody appreciates me for who I am and in this system, then maybe this system isn't for me. I was having a hard time with that structure and also being adventurous and creative and fun. And I said, maybe there isn't a place for both.
Right. It's exactly what you're saying. You're saying, especially now these days, we all feel like to be cool, you need to fit in. And it's actually,
That's right.
And it's a thing that I think comes up for almost every teenager. But I think it's such a normal, natural thing to be a little bit different. And some of us, our differences and our like specialties are like crushed because we don't know how to bring it out while also being a 14-year-old and fitting in. Eventually, your last school that you went to, you did flourish in.
I did.
Yeah. So,
I did.
So what it like, okay, when you go from something like not feeling like you belong or feeling a little bit like an outsider, a misfit, all that stuff, and then you find your place, and I can relate. So what was that like for you?
To be seen and appreciated for who you are, there's nothing like it. And that's when you begin to flourish. I walked into this school. I was in 11th grade because, again, I was kicked out of 8th, 9th, and 10th. I get into this new school in 11th grade, and immediately they saw my talents. They made me, I'm very musical and I love to sing. They made me choir head. They put me in charge of all these creative projects. And then, you know what happened? Not only did I flourish in my creativity and in my talents, I began to flourish academically, right?
Yeah.
I began to flourish spiritually, emotionally. All it takes is for people to see you, to believe in you, to appreciate you for who you are. And that's when I was able to go through my own growth and my own maturity and be able to see that I can be myself within the boundaries of Torah. I could still have fun and still be creative and still live freely as me. And that obviously opened the doors for me to grow into myself and become the person that God created me to be, and not the person that my society wanted me to be.
Yeah. And what an amazing lesson to learn at that age. Because that's what that's the age that you basically, again, built that foundation. And I think we'll see throughout the story that that's something that kept coming up. You graduated high school, eventually you got married, and you moved to Israel. And this was a time in your life where you found yourself in a very unfamiliar place, right? You had no friends, no family. You basically were starting anew. And I know you shared that you struggled in that space. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of having to find yourself again? And when I think of this, you sound like an adult, right? You moved to a new country. You have a husband.
Yes.
But when I think about it in terms of your age, you were very, very young.
I was only 22.
Yeah.
Yeah, which,
it's a baby. It's a baby.
Child.
Yeah.
You know, we think of it as a mature adult because, you know, especially in our circles, many people are married at 22 and, you know, we're babies. Yeah, this was not easy. Remember, this was in almost 1999, the end of 98. So we didn't have the luxuries then that we have now. And by luxuries, I include the internet and WhatsApp chats, cell phones even. We didn't have any of that stuff. So moving to the other side of the world meant you're literally living on the other side of the world, disconnected from everyone, from everything. It was really different than it is today. Yeah. Okay, so get into that mindset. It was hard. And I had nothing to do. I had no job. Yeah. I had no friends. I had no family. I had no one. I didn't know what to do with myself. And of course, adjusting to marriage, which is an adjustment for everyone. But I had an initial level of adjustment being that I married someone who was from a different culture. Yeah. I'm American. He's from Mexico. I was Ashkenaz. He's Sephardic.
All the stuff.
There were so many cultural changes that were needed. So I did experience, we'll call it a delicate emotional state that I kind of fell into. Yeah. And it wasn't easy, you know, and then shortly after we were there, more or less a year later, was the beginning of the intifada. It was a nightmare. So we had buses blowing up all over the place. If I went to a pizza shop the day before and the next day that pizza shop blew up, like anywhere, it was so frightening. And I got really scared. And I forgot to mention I was newly pregnant also. Wow. You know, which of course is a blessing, the biggest blessing, but it was part of the whole adjustment. So I had this new body that I'm adjusting to and
So nothing was the same. Nothing.
Hormones. So nothing was the same. And then again, it was, you know, just a few months later, the intifada started and I'm pregnant and I'm petrified. And it was very, very scary. And I didn't have a support group to fall onto. I was too far from everyone. And even my husband, I didn't want to burden him with what I was going through. And not only burden him, that sounds a little righteous, but it was also coming from a place of, I didn't want to disappoint him. Like he married this strong, confident, independent woman who's capable and self-sufficient. And now
it's vulnerable.
Who is this person? It was so vulnerable. I wasn't ready for that. And I couldn't do it.
I mean, I can't imagine because like I'm 28, I'm almost 29 and I still deal with stuff like that. So I can't, like you were really, really young to deal with this. You have a really interesting story of how you got yourself out of this and it brought you to education, right? So can you share, like, I think, was it your husband that introduced you to this idea?
Yes. Well, I was a teacher before that
Hmm.
for younger students. When I was single, I taught third grade, I taught sixth grade, I was moving my
Okay.
way up. Eighth grade, even that just fell into my lap.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine being a teacher, being, I was barely a student. How can I be a teacher?
That's so
You know,
funny. Yeah.
right? Although I learned later that the worst students make the best teachers because
Oh,
we know all the tricks.
yeah.
And so I was a teacher, but then I moved to Israel. And again,
Yeah.
I'm 22. I didn't speak Hebrew at all.
Oh,
And I had like my typical like
yeah.
yeshiva
Yeah. Yeah.
Hebrew that we learned, but like, I couldn't teach an Israeli school, of course. I didn't speak Hebrew. Nobody would hire me. And my husband said to me, so why don't you go teach in seminary? Like he saw me sitting bored on the couch. I didn't know what to do with myself. He said, you love teaching. Why don't you go apply to one of the seminaries? And I literally laughed out loud, okay, before LOL was a
Yeah.
thing. And I said, are you kidding? Like, first of all, I just turned 22. No one's going to hire me to teach. I don't even know how to teach that
Hmm.
type of age or
Yeah.
genre or whatever. No one's going to listen to me. No one's going to hire me. Like, this is insane.
Yeah.
I'm not that Rebbitzin. Rebbitzins teach in seminary. And he said to me something that was so simple and so smart. Why don't you just apply? Worst comes to worst, you'll come back home and sit back down on the couch.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah,
So
like it
simple,
doesn't,
but so hard. So
so
scary.
simple,
Yeah.
but so scary. And I was like, okay, so I'll get rejected again, But I also said, like, if I get rejected, it's not going to be anything personal because they don't know me.
Right.
It'll be because of my age, or it'll be because I just don't fit there. I told myself that. I said, okay, let me apply. Now, I don't know what made me reach out to this specific seminary. I think I called a few places that I just knew about.
Mm.
There was one particular seminary, and they're the ones who called me back and said, we actually have a teacher who is going on maternity leave. So if you want to come down to give a model lesson, we'll be happy to meet you.
Wow.
So I was like, oh my gosh, I was so excited that I had something to do.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to prepare a class to give. And it was so exciting for me. And I sat down and I put hours and hours into this model lesson. And on the designated day, I went down to the seminary and I taught the class. And I'm telling this story because there was such a powerful lesson here that I think is important to share. I taught the class, and the principal, Rabbi Borstein, he came over to me afterwards, and he was so smart. This was a true educator.
Wow.
He said to me, thank you for the class. He said, are you a third grade teacher?
Really?
And I said, well, I've been teaching third grade for a couple of years, so I guess. He said, I want you to come back tomorrow and teach this same class to 18-year-olds. I said, okay. And I went home and I said, all right, I guess that lollipop example wasn't the best. All right, how can I mature this class a little bit? And I thought about it and I really put myself into it. I went back the next day. I gave it to a different class in the seminary and I got the job.
Wow.
And to me, it was brilliant. That principal could have easily looked
Yeah.
at me and said, no, she's a third grade teacher. She doesn't have what it takes.
Wow.
But he didn't. He saw my potential. He believed in me and he saw that I needed some guidance.
It's amazing.
And that was the beginning of my seminary teaching career and my adult teaching career. And that probably is what led me to be a motivational speaker today.
I was gonna say, hearing that you never thought about doing this and how it happened for you is wild because
Yeah.
I think anyone that meets you can see you're a natural educator. So I think it's so funny how life happens sometimes that we don't even know what we are meant to be doing or what we're good at. And someone takes one person or one opportunity to come and
That's it.
fall into your lap for you to see basically what's been in front of you the whole time. So I find
That's
that very fascinating. What did like getting this job, finding a purpose do for you in terms of all the stuff you were struggling before with? The loneliness, the identity stuff that you were feeling like really right before you started this job. Like, how did it shift for you once you had this thing to wake up for in the morning?
I'm going to be very honest. Okay.
Yes, please. Always.
Okay. It helped me in many ways because I was busy. I was teaching, which I loved, which meant I was able to give and share and connect. But the anxiety that I developed living in that place at that time under my circumstances did not get any better.
Yeah.
Just because I was busier. It didn't actually make my anxiety better. And by the way, I must admit and acknowledge the fact that I had never had anxiety before in my entire life. It was completely against my nature.
Yeah.
I was super optimistic by nature. One might even have called me happy-go-lucky, you know? And I wasn't used to anxiety.
Yeah.
I was not used to it. And it even developed into depression. It eventually developed into agoraphobia. Agoraphobia, for those of you who don't know, is the fear of crowded places and open spaces. And for me, I am an extrovert. I am a people person. And I really struggled. I was so scared to leave my home. And I did. I pushed myself because I had a job and I loved what I did. And I loved once I got there, but I was so scared to travel all the way there.
Yeah.
But when I talk about anxiety, I developed certain phobias, things that, again, this was so against my nature. And that's why I didn't know what was happening. And remember, this is 1998 and 99. I didn't have the verbiage. I ever heard of the word anxiety. I heard of depression, but that was for like sick people who are in bed and can't get up. And I never heard of these ideas. Nobody spoke about this. So I didn't have the wording to express the way I was feeling. And I didn't want to express it because I didn't want to burden my husband with it. And by the way, I didn't even want to share it with my mother because my mother was herself going through so much with her sick husband, raising 1 million kids, working full time. At that moment, at that place and time, I was the child who was bringing her the most nachas from anyone. I was married to a Talmud Chacham and living in Eretz Yisrael, and I was, living her dream for me and what was my dream as well. And she was so proud of me. How could I burden her with everything I was experiencing, right? So I was carrying everything alone.
Yeah. It's not only scary to go through something like this when you know about this stuff, but to go through it with all these pressures that you had. First of all, I'm so sorry that you went through this, and I'm so grateful that you're sharing this. What helped you with that stuff? Like, if you had no one to turn to, or you were too nervous to talk about it, how did you deal with it?
So, what's interesting is I didn't know what was going on, but I knew that something was wrong and something had to change because I didn't want to live like this the rest of my life, but I didn't know what to do to make anything different. So I mentioned that I didn't discuss it with my husband, but there's no question that my husband picked up on something. Yeah.
Live together.
He's a smart man. We live together. Yeah. He was able to recognize there were certain patterns that I'll give you just a couple of examples that come to mind, but there were so many more, of course. I developed, again, this anxiety that came with these phobias of I'm telling you, I'm going to share with you something that's very, very vulnerable for me to say, but it was so scary at the time, but I know this could help people. I would walk down the street and be scared that the lamppost was going to fall onto my head. This wasn't even related to terrorism anymore. Yeah. This was just, I was scared of regular things. I was scared of using the wrong words. My husband would use an expression like, all right, let's go kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I'd be like, no, we're not killing anyone. No birds, no stones, no people. There were things, even words would make me feel I just, I was petrified of certain things before I would leave in the morning to go on a bus. Of course, I thought I would never come home that day. Like I said, that's it. But I purposely said, I am not going to call my mother and my sisters to say goodbye, even though I wanted to, because I said, then it's going to be one of those stories that, she called us right before she said goodbye. I was like, no, so then maybe if I don't call, it won't happen.
Oh my gosh.
This is what the imprisonment that was going on in my brain. I was consumed with these fears. I was consumed with anxiety. And I developed, these crazy superstitions in my own mind that didn't even exist, and I realized later that this is actually a concept in the Gemara called nichosh, when we guess things if I don't do this, then this is going to happen. I was like, well, this is a real thing. Okay. So it made me feel a little bit less crazy. We all have a tiny bit of it in us, but I never had any of that before. And then suddenly it was consuming my life. So my husband noticed some of these things. You can't live with a person experiencing this and not pick up on something being wrong.
Yeah.
So that was when I expressed a little bit of how I was feeling. And my husband didn't have any of this stuff. So he was like, what? Where's your Emuna? Where's your bitachon? In a nice way, of course. But I was like, what do you mean? Of course I have Emuna and bitachon. But I look at me. I cover my hair. I woke up like this. And he said, did you ever study Emuna and bitachon? I No, I never studied. I don't have to study it. I was born into it.
Can you just share what Emuna B'tachon is? Because I have...
I'm so...
No, I just have all sorts of Jewish women on here.
Of course. Now, Emuna and Bitachon are two words that are the basis of our principles, of Judaism in general. And I'm just going to give you a basic translation because they're really so much more than that. Emuna means having faith in God, having knowledge of God's creation of the world and his living presence in our day-to-day. And bitachon is the trust that we have in him. The way I like to explain it is that bitachon to me means the actualization of the Emuna. Because Emuna, the faith, the knowledge, takes place in your head. Bitachon takes place in your actual behaviors and actions. It's like when everything I know in my mind, and I could preach from today till tomorrow about God, and he's always in my life, and he does everything, and nothing can happen without his will, and that, right? Yeah. And then you experience something, and you're like, okay, how am I reacting now?
Right. The practicality.
How am I behaving now?
Yeah.
So it's the practical application of the knowledge of God's existence. Yeah. This is the fundamental of life, right? So my husband said to me, did you ever learn Emuna and Bitachon, right? Faith and belief and trust in God. I was like, I didn't have to learn it. I grew up in it. I was born into it. He said, how about if you get a sefer, get a book that talks about this and really learn about it? I said, okay, it can't hurt. And I did. I bought myself a wonderful, powerful book on this topic. And I started learning. And I started learning and I started learning. And the more I learned, the more I understood that, yes, of course I believe in God. And of course, I even believe that God is involved in every aspect of my life. But do I actually have a relationship with him? I don't know if I have a relationship. I don't think I turn to him as my father who's carrying me every step of the way. And I don't think I really understood how much he loves me. I may have had a relationship with him, but it was more of a fear-based relationship. Was it love? I don't know. And I started learning how much he loves me. And that's why everything that happens is for my best, because of his love for me. And it just created an entire perspective shift for me of my relationship with him. And I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg with these few words that I said, but it's so much deeper than that. And slowly, I found myself letting go of those fears, of the anxieties, of the phobias, of all of these things that I was experiencing. And this was constant work, by the way. What I didn't realize was that it's not enough to just say, oh, of course I believe in God. This is a constant effort. The word in Hebrew for training, when you're going to like a physical trainer, hitamnut. Hitamnut is the same root as the word emuna. Because we have to train ourselves and build those Emuna muscles every single day. And I realized I wasn't doing that. I wasn't working on it every day. So that made a huge difference in me.
Wow. First of all, I want to say that it's so clear how educated you are. You have like your WhatsApp status videos and your Instagram videos. And a lot of people know this stuff, but when you speak, you can really see that you really learned it. So I want to thank you for that, first of all. And then I want to ask you, why did you choose to be open about all of this?
Well, before I answer that question, I just want to give a little bit of a disclaimer because it's very important for people to understand that there are different levels of anxiety and depression. And sometimes people have a clinical anxiety disorder or a clinical depression. And I didn't. For me, it was circumstantial, it was situational, and it was very real. And for anyone who's struggling with either type, they both manifest the same way. And they're both equally real, and they're both in equal challenge and struggle. However, I didn't need medication to get me out of it. I needed a perspective shift and a mindset shift and to work on my trust and my relationship with God. Sometimes a person might need medication to get them to a place where they can even work on their relationship with God or work on their mindset. So my message is that everyone needs the mindset shift and everyone needs a relationship with God, but some people need to get to a place first where they could even learn about that and accept it. It's important to understand this doesn't mean that if you need medication, that this isn't a place of medication. They have to work in tandem with each other.
Yeah. No,
okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I want to say one important point. Okay. Anxiety is not the problem. Thinking anxiety is the problem is the problem. Anxiety is not your enemy. Anxiety has to be your friend. And this is how I was able to overcome it and work through it. Because if you're friends, you're never going to hurt each other. And if it's your enemy, you can't negotiate with an enemy. Right. So anxiety has to be your friend. And that means when you feel anxiety, first of all, know what it is. Knowledge. Very important. Anxiety is an alarm. Rings in your body to say, something isn't right. I don't feel safe. Something feels wrong. Okay, great. I don't feel safe. What is it that's not making me feel safe? Now let me evaluate. Is this something that is credible or is it not credible? Okay, so then why am I feeling unsafe? Let me figure that out. But not fighting the anxiety by saying, okay, anxiety, hi, you're here today. Come sit with me. Let's have a coffee. Yeah. Let's sit together. Let's talk about what we're going to do today. Accept the fact that anxiety is totally normal. Anxiety is not the problem. We just have to figure out, why are the alarm bells ringing and what's my next step? How am I going to figure out how to deal with the thing that my body is telling me is a danger when it's not a danger? So of course, there are a lot of steps to that, but I just wanted to kind of throw that out there so people realize, like, this is the first step to take to getting rid of it. It's about setting boundaries with your anxiety.
The alarms our bodies are sending us, but it's doing us a favor. It's coming from a place where at some point it was protecting us, right? Which is what you were saying.
Yes.
And so it goes back to the same, have some compassion for it because it's there to protect you. Now, again, maybe you don't need those anymore, but it's still trying to, right? So it ties back. That is
exactly right. Yeah. It all goes together. It's exactly what it is. At one point, you needed that alarm because it was going to save you. Yeah. Right now, you don't need it anymore. You're good. It's about telling yourself, okay, thank you so much for being there for me. Again, it's your friend. It's not your enemy. Thank you, anxiety. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for being there. But right now, I don't need you. Yeah. And that's how we create those boundaries and tell the anxiety, thank you so much. Come back when I really need you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right now is not the right time.
Yeah. I love how you're talking about it.
Of course. It's important for people to know that. Now, to answer your question, why did I decide to disclose this and share all this with people? You know, everything that I went through, I experienced for my own growth. We don't go through things as punishments. We don't go through things as because God doesn't like us or we're disappointed in us. It doesn't work that way. Not at all. Any challenge that we go through is there for us to prove to ourselves more than to anyone else how strong we are, how great we are, and it's to propel us to the next level of our lives. Right? When you play a video game, are you a gamer at all? Do you play video games?
I'm really not.
Okay. I'm not either, but we all know the premise of video games, right?
Yes.
When you play a video game, each level that you're on is super challenging and you have to get to the next level. How do you feel when you pass that initial stage, that initial level on a video game? You're like, whoa, I did this. I'm a champion. Then you get to the next level, and once again you start all over again. Well, oh no!
I do horseback riding competitively, so it's all in level, so I can totally relate to this.
You relate to me, okay? So we'll use that example. Okay. I love that so much, by the way, that you are a professional horseback rider.
Thank you. Yeah, but again, it goes in levels, right? You compete in levels, and every time I get to a different level, I'm like, first of all, I never thought I'm going to get here. And I can't believe I'm doing it. Right. And then I do it and I feel very accomplished, but I'm like, oh my gosh, now I need to get to this next level.
It's constant. Yeah. Oh, I love that. So that's a great example as well. And that's the thing, you said, I never thought I'd be here.
Yeah.
Every time we experience a challenge, we're like, I never thought I'd be here. Right.
Yeah.
And if we look back, we're like, I never thought I could come to this place, right? How far I've actually come. And that's why the Hebrew word for challenge is nisayon. It means a test. It means a challenge. But the beginning part of that word is the word nes. Nes or nes. Nes means a miracle. And it means two things, actually. Nes means a miracle. So first of all, we don't get there alone. We're not going through challenges by ourselves. God is there the entire time with us, walking through us. And he's creating miracles for us to get through that challenge. And that's why we get through it. And that's the problem. Part of the problem with anxiety is we're so worried about the future, about something that might happen, First of all, it might not happen. And it most likely won't happen. 99% of the things we worry about never happen.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know, maybe worrying works. Maybe that's why it doesn't happen, right? But no, they never happen, and we waste so much time and energy on it. But let's say you're that 1% and it does happen. Right now, it's so scary because you can't imagine what you would do if it happens. That's because it hasn't happened, and God has not yet given you the tools to deal with it.
Wow.
But if it were to happen, you're also going to get the tools to deal with it, and it won't be that scary anymore.
Wow.
Right? So that's what the nace is. You know what else nace means? Not only miracle, it also means a banner, a flag.
I didn't know that.
Yes, that's what it means. It's another Hebrew word. When you talk about raising a flag or raising a banner, you say the modern day for the modern term for flag is degel, but the original term for it is nace. Visat nace lekabetz, which are words that we say in our prayers. You will hold up. We're holding up that banner of victory, right? That's what it means. So who are we holding up this banner for? When you get through a challenge, you're holding it up for yourself, because you're proving to yourself, oh my gosh, look how strong you are. Look who you can be. Look what you can do. And it propels you to accomplish more and to do more. I'm not even talking about, God forbid, big serious challenges, which of course fits under this category. I'm talking about the regular stuff that we go through, because not everything has to be so dark. We go through regular challenges on a daily basis. So what I realized was that everything that I've been through, I experienced for my own growth and to help others who are experiencing this also. That's the reason why I went through it. I remember at one point, because this was my whole 20s, struggling with these deep emotional things that I had to get past, and these anxieties and depression. It was most of my 20s. And then I moved to Mexico, which is a whole other topic. So we're not going to get into that detail, but I moved to Mexico, which brought me down. It was such a difficult challenge living there, not speaking Spanish, nobody speaking English, letting go of my identity. Everything was so difficult for me living in Mexico. Those were my whole 30s. And I remember at one point thinking, like, I wasted my whole 20s on my mental health struggles. I wasted my whole 30s on my emotional health struggles. Like, what's going on? What's going on? Like, that was what, and then it hit me. And I said, no, I didn't waste it at all. I went through all of that. Everything that I struggled with mentally, everything I struggled with emotionally, because that's who built me into who I am. Wow. I would not be this person if I didn't go through that. It wasn't a waste at all. It was exactly how those years were meant to be used.
Wow.
So what would be a waste of those years would be if I went through all that and didn't share it with people.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's so powerful. Why I have this podcast is exactly this. I always say on here to my guests, like, if you didn't share your story, somebody sitting at home, you in your 20s, would feel like they're crazy. They're the only ones going through this, and it can drive you crazy. You feel alone. Yes. When you have people like you, who, by the way, I have to say, before doing all this research, I really thought you were this perfect human being. But knowing your story and knowing your struggles and knowing what came out of it makes you so much more admirable in my eyes, and it makes you so much more relatable. When you meet people who overcame stuff, that teaches you something. When you meet somebody who is perfect, that teaches me nothing.
I love that. It's so true. It is so true. And not only is it nothing to learn from them, but it's even a little intimidating and infuriating, actually. So that's part of why I want to share this with people. As I mentioned in the beginning, what I see when I look in the mirror is this imperfect human who's just trying her best like everyone else. You know, just recently, and people asking me questions, and somebody said to me, how do you react? Like, are you okay with people coming over to you and fangirling? Oh. You know, those are her words. And I said, first of all, I'm not into fangirling and worshiping people. So I'm not, we'll change the wording a little, but how do I feel when people come over to me to say hi? I said, I am thrilled. And a lot of people were writing in the comments, I'm a little intimidated. I've seen you sometimes and I was so intimidated. And I said, I am so not intimidating. I'm really not, I'm imperfect just like you. And I think that's why it's important for people to see, like, I am not a perfect person. I am just like you, trying my best to learn from the things I've been through. I've been through a lot of things and experienced so much in my life. And I'm just trying to be my best self based on the things I've experienced,
Yeah.
just like you are. And I want people to not be intimidated to talk to me and to see me and to come over to me. But you're right. When you give an image of perfection, it's extremely intimidating and people don't want to connect and people can't relate.
Yeah.
And then who are you helping?
Exactly. One last question. It's something that I ask all my guests, and it's, what does being a trailblazer mean to you?
Okay. I think that being a trailblazer is the basic definition of a Jew, first of all. Okay. Being an independent thinker, being able to do what we know is the right thing to do, regardless of what people around us are doing, right? It means being a leader, being a thinker, and it means being a critical thinker. It means that I don't follow anyone blindly or anything blindly. It means I am intentional about why I do what I do. But then I add to it the strengths and the gifts that was given to me by God, and to me, how could I not be? It means that I have to be a positive leader. Now I have an opportunity to be that positive leader that my high school thought I wasn't being, right? It means being a positive leader, being a role model. And to me, the main traits of being a leader are humility and seeing the greatness in others. Being able to allow other people to grow in their strengths also. So I don't consider myself an influencer, and I'm not saying that in a contrite way. I'm not saying that in a way of like, I'm not an influencer. I am an influencer. We're all an influencers. We open our mouths and we influence people around us. But I'm not the social media style influencer. My dream is for everyone that crosses my path to become a co-leader with me, not to be a follower. Right? I'm not a leader that has followers. I am a leader that has co-leaders, because my mission in life is really to help other women live on purpose and intentionally by rediscovering the genius and joy of Judaism, by discovering who they are, by allowing them to be seen and appreciated and recognized for their strengths, and to take them and to just fly with them. So I like to offer my own story of my own journeys that I've been on. I like to offer education, tools, and techniques through the wisdom of Torah, which is the strength of who we are and the basis of who we are, that enables people to make choices that will lead them to becoming their healthiest and happiest selves, whether, in their own lives, whether it's in a more public way. We build every day. We're always creating and building. We create small little things every day, or we focus on creating something big. But, being a leader is not easy. But if you fear, my main fear in life, you ready for this? My main fear is the fear of unfulfilled potential.
Oh, wow.
So if you fear unfulfilled potential more than you fear the obstacles leading there, then you get yourself out there and you choose the obvious option.
You're
even if it's
unstoppable.
difficult. You just go, and my mission is to try to help other people get there. Break through your barriers, break through your obstacles, and become the person that God created you to be, and not the person that society expects you to be.
Oh, I love that. Don't have to be the person that everybody wants you to be. Like, that's something that we all need to hear. And really, like, I was imagining the trail that you're blazing, and a lot of us blaze the trail and then people are behind, but it sounds like for you, they're just standing right with you and they're just going,
I want to be right next to me,
Yeah.
just walking through it together.
I love that. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.